All right, so for section 4.3, we are going to deviate from the notes a little bit that I would usually do, and we're going to look at a different packet. The first page says Rotation Rules Part 1. That's kind of a discovery part that I would typically do in class. We're going to go to Part 2, and I'm going to show you how this works. Now, once upon a time, we basically had students memorize a bunch of rules, and I can't prevent you from just memorizing them. But what I've learned is that these are rules that you could potentially need in the future on some sort of standardized test, or just in life in general, being able to do these sorts of rotations and reflections. And you're probably not going to memorize these rules for any long-term period. That is, I never even memorized them, and I taught them year after year. So I came up with this process where we're basically going to construct the rules every single time. And I know it sounds pretty like a lot of work, but it actually goes pretty fast once you catch on. So we are rotating today. That means to turn, to spin, and we are going to be rotating around the origin here of 0, 0. So here's a picture, and I have cut out a nice little triangle to put on top of that triangle right there. Now if you look at that triangle, the 0.31 right here is it's the only part that's not, the only corner that's not on an axis. So we're going to take this triangle and we're going to rotate it 90 degrees counterclockwise. Counterclockwise is this way. Remember, a straight line is 180 degrees. 90 degrees is kind of half of that. So we're going to be rotating from the x-axis up to the y-axis. And when you rotate, you want to keep the side of the triangle that is on the axis right now needs to end up on an axis. So it turns, it spins, and it ends up like this. And the question is, the 0.31 turned into what point? It looks like it's right about here. That is where our triangle ended up. The 0.31 turned into the point -1, 3. If you can keep this simple rotation kind of in your head, well then the question is, what happened to those numbers? So did they switch places? Look at the 3, look at the 1. Did they switch order? So they switched order. And did the x or the y change? Well, the x, the 3 is still a 3. The 1 turned into a -1. So the y changed. So they switched order and the y value changed. That means that every time we rotate 90 degrees, we are going to switch the order and change that y value. Every time. So let's look at the next one. Rotating 180 degrees. 180 degrees is halfway around a circle. It's turning. So we are going to take this point, this triangle, and the part that is on the x-axis, we're going to spin halfway around the circle until it hits another axis. So take it, start to spin it, spin it, spin it. Here was the 90-degree location, but we need to keep going. So keep spinning until it hits the axis, and there it is. It goes here now. So the 0.31 turned into what point? This corner right here ended up all the way down here at -3, -1. So, the 0.31 turned into -3, -1. What happened? Did they switch order? Did the 3 and the 1 switch order? They did not. Did the x value change? Did the 3 change? Yes, the x changed. And when I say the x and the y changed, I'm referring to the sign. The x changed, but also the y value changed. So here the x and the y value both change. Every time you rotate 180 degrees, the x changes sign and the y changes sign. That's all you have to do. What about rotating 270 degrees? So we took our little triangle right here. We rotated 90 degrees, and it went up here. Then we kept rotating 180 degrees. Now keep spinning it until the same side hits the next axis. Down here. This is a 270 degree rotation. It's going to look like this. So, the 0.31 turned into, what point is this? 1, -3. All right, what happens? Let's see here. Did they switch order? Did the 3 and the 1 change order? Switch order. The 3 was first, now the 3 second. They switched order. And did either of them change signs? The 3 or the 1? The 3. So the x changed signs. Now I know this may seem a little tricky. I like using bigger triangles because I think they're easier to turn. The little triangle is hard to maneuver. The bigger triangle is a little bit better. I also have discovered that if you do this with your hand, you're basically making the triangle. And then you can actually turn your hand and rotate it. 90 degrees is pretty easy. Go ahead and try. And you can see that the 3, 1 turns in to a -1, 3. It goes left and then it goes up. And you can keep rotating. 180 degrees. See, it goes -3, -1. Now, 270 degrees is a little tricky, a little bit harder to do, but it is possible in most cases. So what I recommend is that as you do these problems, use your hand as your triangle. Make the triangle, turn it, and see what happens. Instead of the long and then the short, it goes the short and then the long. Instead of going to the right and up, it goes left and up. Left and right, left is negative, right is positive, up is positive, and down is negative. Please, 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 on a standard test in school, I would be seeing students doing this the whole time to keep track of the rules. Please don't memorize them. Just practice doing this to see what happens. So, let's apply the patterns together. A couple pages later, we're skipping a little bit more. Here's the deal. We're going to just use the rules. So, graph, triangle, JKL, and its image after the rotation. All right, JKL, let's go ahead and graph them. J is -4, 7, so that means left 4, up 7. K is 5, 8. That means right 5, up 8. L is -1, -6. That means left 1, down 6. And it's a triangle. If you want a straight edge, try like the side of an ID or a side of a piece of paper. Now we need to go ahead and figure out what the rule is and apply the rule. So let's make our chart just like we did in section 4.1. Making a T-chart. J, K, and L, after we move them, turn into J prime, K prime, L prime. And there's not a lot of work here to do. What we need to do is identify the rule. Once we identify the rule, using the rule is actually pretty quick. So let's see here, 180 degrees. If we took our triangle and it went right and up and we turn it, there's 90. Here is 180. Let's see, starts like this, ends like this. So here it goes left and then down. And the left is the big number, the down is the little number. So the 0.31 looked like this, now looks like this. -3, -1 is what it turns into. How did we describe that rule? We said that we changed the X and we changed the Y. So let's write that down over here in our chart. Change X, change Y. You could also just say change both if you wanted. So do that. -4, change it. +4. +7, change it. -7. +5, change it. -5. +8, change it. -8. -1, change it. +1. -6, change it. +6. Those are the points. That's the work. This over here will hopefully be something that you just start doing with your hand, turning the hand, watching the rotation. All we have to do now is actually graph them. So let's see here. J prime is now 4, -7. I think I may have actually counted that one wrong, 4L. Yeah, L should have actually been there. So this is J prime. K prime is -5, -8. And L is 1/6. And you have your new triangle. Let's do the next one. Rotate the image 90 degrees. Alright, so this one is very, very similar to this one, except here, notice they don't tell you A, B, C, D. You have to find those numbers yourself. So, where is point A? It's at -3, +2. Left 3, up 2. D is left 4, down 1. C is left 2, down 2. So left 4, down 1 for B. And D is -4, -1. B is 1, -1. if you start with the wrong points, you will get the wrong answer, so make sure you count carefully with those points. Now, rotating 90 degrees. Make your triangle. Turn it 90 degrees. What happens? If it was 3, 1, it's now -1, +3. So 3, 1 turned into -1, +3. What happened? We switched the order, and the y changed. The 1 turned into -1. Now when I talk about which one changes, I'm talking about the initial x and y. I understand the y turns into the x because we switched the order. I'm talking about the initial y. A, B, C, D turn into A prime, B prime, C prime, D prime. Now I personally, when I know which one changes and only one of them changes, I actually like to go through and circle the y values so that I know the 2 is the one that changes. So switch the order of the -3, 2 and change the 2. Changes to -2, -3. Switch the order of 1, -1 and change the sign of the -1. 1, 1. -2, -2. Switch the order and change the sign of this -2. Turns into 2, -2. And -4, 1, switch the order and change the -1 to +1. Last thing, you are expected to go ahead and graph them. A prime is left 2, down 3. B prime is right 1, up 1. C prime is right 2, down 2. And D prime is right 1, down 4. If you've done it correctly, your shape should still look the same. If it's significantly smaller or bigger, or it's kind of like a different shape, maybe it's bigger or smaller, one of the corners seems to be off, then that probably means there's a mistake back here. All right, let's do a composition. So here, graph triangle RST with vertices R, S, and T, and its image after the composition. So let's start with graphing RST. So here, R is at -3, 5. S is at -5, 0. And T is at 6, 1. So here, the first thing we're being asked to do is a rotation of 270 degrees, and then we're being asked to do a reflection in the y-axis. Now, students oftentimes, and I don't quite understand why, ask which one to do first, the rotation or the reflection. Well, do the rotation first because it's first. It's written first. It's above. It's on the first line. Do the reflection second because it's on the second line. If the reflection was above the rotation, you would do that first. Do them in the order on your paper. You have to do them in that particular order. So other than that, we're going to make the chart just like we have before. R is -3, 5. S is -5, 0. T is 6, 1. First thing we're going to do is the rotation. RST, turn into R prime, S prime, T prime. we need the rule for a 270-degree rotation. So if you're having trouble spinning your arm around like that, I don't blame you. It kind of hurts, feels like you're getting your arm twisted. So instead of going all the way around that way, you could just kind of go backward, and it'll look something like this. So 270-degree rotation is right 3 up 1, and it turns into right 1 down 3. 3 1 turns into 1 negative 3. What's the rule? We switch the order, and which one changed? The 3 or the 1? The 3. So you change the x. So change the x value. So negative 3, 5. Switch the order, change the negative 3. 5, 3. Negative 5, 0. Switch the order, change the negative 5. 0, 5. 6, 1. Switch the order, change the 6. 1, negative 6. Then we're going to do it again. R prime, S prime, T prime turn into R double prime, S double prime, T double prime. We need the rule for the reflection in the y-axis. So, think of your triangle again. Which axis is the y? Which axis is the y? The y-axis is the vertical. So we're going to take our triangle and we're going to flip it across. So the point 3, 1 turns into the point negative 3, 1. So 3, 1 turned into negative 3, positive 1. What happened to those numbers? They stay in the same order, just the x value changed. So you can change the x, which means the 5, the 0, and the 1 get changed. 5, 3 turns into negative 5, 3. Just change the x. 0, 5. Now, 0 is the only number that we don't really care about plus or minus, positive or negative, because 0 is 0. So that actually doesn't change, because if you make it negative 0, it's still 0. 1 negative 6 turns into negative 1 negative 6. Now please be sure to read the directions carefully. This particular one says to graph the image after the composition, which means I only want R double prime, S double prime, T double prime graphed. So R double prime is negative 5, 3. That's left 5, down 3. S double prime is 0, 5, means up 5. T prime is negative 1, negative 6, negative 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Negative 6. Now I just had to take a moment, pause the video, because something here bothers me. Look at R prime. Look at S prime. You see how far apart those are? You see R and S? They're much closer than R prime, double prime, and S double prime. And this composition should be rigid. The first shape and the last shape should look the same. It might be flipped, it might be turned, but it should not be bigger or smaller. And right now, this side just got bigger, and this side, from R double prime to T double prime, just got smaller. So I'm looking, what did I do wrong? Do you see it? It's something silly. It's something small. And that something is I plotted negative 5, negative 3, instead of negative 5, positive 3. And that keeps my shape looking the same. So it's a way to check. If your shape changes size, something went wrong, try to figure out where that mistake is. And with this lesson, you should have enough information now to go ahead and do your homework.